using it because I have to stay here, so I can just. Do you need it?
If you want to use it, you can use it. You have to plug it in.
Yeah, I don't.
Laser pointer if you want to use it.
Yeah, maybe.
Press this thing.
Okay, we're going to get the second day of PET started and the first session started. So if you're coming in, please take your seats. If you're talking, please finish your conversations. I would just like to issue a second call. Is the speaker for the second paper, Privacy Preserving Search of Similar Patients and Genomic Data, is a speaker for that paper here? Because I have not met you if you're here. Speaker for the second paper. Raise your hand, please. Speaker for the second paper. Okay, thank you. All right, we're ready to go then. Thanks everybody for coming to the second day of PETS. We're starting with the first session on analytics. Our first speaker will be talking about privacy preserving machine learning. This is Hassan Takabi.
All right, thank you. Good morning, everyone. So my name is Hassan Takabi. I'm an assistant professor at the University of North Texas. So the work today I'm going to talk about is privacy preserving machine learning as a service, as a joint work with my PhD student Hassan Hassami Fard, and a collaboration with is it good? Mehdi Qasemi from University of Saskatchewan, Canada, and Rebecca Wright from Rutgers. I don't need to tell the audience here about machine learning, so I'll jump right in about why machine learning as a service and why privacy issues here. So as the machine learning services has grown in different domains, nowadays similar to any other cloud service, we could have machine learning as a service, which essentially we can train machine learning models on a cloud infrastructure, and also once the model is built, use that for prediction or classification of the data that we have. There are several such services currently available from big companies, and there are a lot of startups in this domain: Microsoft Azure, Amazon, Google, GraphLab, and there are several other companies that are providing the service. But of course, when we're dealing with machine learning, we're dealing with data, and privacy-sensitive data is always an issue. So our goal in this talk in this paper is to provide a privacy-preserving machine learning as a service, which allows different parties in the ecosystem to receive or provide services without having to reveal their sensitive data. And essentially, the core contribution is applying neural networks over encrypted data. So that's what I'm going to be talking about. So the threat model that we're considering is that the client has the data, wants to use the cloud service to train a model, but without sharing the data with the service provider. So the data would be encrypted, provided to the service, the model is built on it, and then this client is the only one who will be able to use that specific model built for using its own data. And also sometimes the servers, the service providers, they spend a lot of resources on building a machine learning model, and they don't necessarily want the clients to know their model. So the privacy of model also is another aspect that should be preserved against the clients. So the solution that we have here is essentially based on homomorphic encryption. So the main building blocks of our work is homomorphic encryption and neural networks. Generally, the work that exists in this area are based on either secure multi-party computation, differential privacy, and our work is homomorphic encryption, another work that I'll talk about. So I'll talk about briefly about the neural network, and then talk about our approach, which essentially the main goal is how to approximate functions that are used in neural network to be able to implement them within the limitations of homomorphic encryption. Neural network structure, generally we have an input layer, output layer, and a number of hidden layers. And the neurons that we have in the hidden layer, typically they take an input, they compute a weighted sum of input, operate a specific function on the sum, and then output that. So most of the practical homomorphic encryptions that exist usually they can support addition and multiplication. So if we look at the operations that are used in neural network, most of them are or we can break them down to addition and multiplication with the exception of activation functions. So generally, the different activation functions used in our neural network, the more common ones are sigmoid or ReLU. So those are the functions so these functions are not implementable in homomorphic encryption as they are. So essentially, what we're doing there out is how to replace these functions and operations that are not compatible with homomorphic encryption with the compatible versions. And our goal is to approximate these functions using polynomials that then we can implement it. So when it comes to approximation, we can basically approximate a function, let's say sigmoid or ReLU, with a different number of functions, different degrees. So the higher degree that we have in polynomial gives us a closer approximation, a better approximation, but it costs us when we want to implement that over homomorphic encryption. So our goal is to keep the approximation to the lowest degree possible. So they're basically playing the trade-off between the degree of the approximation polynomial and the performance of the model. So in the paper, we talked about theory of how to basically find the lowest polynomial degree of a function within a certain error range. So I'm not going to talk about details, but here essentially is how we're doing the approximating function. So this is a sigmoid function. The blue is the original function, and then the green and red are two approximation of the function. Similarly for ReLU, the blue is the original function, and then the black one is an approximation that came. So once we develop this approximation function, now we can generate the approximation functions with this. We started implementing different neural networks on the homomorphic encryption and do some experimenting. So we used a large number of data sets from UC machine learning data sets. So I just present a few of the results here. So before I talk about the results, so the main thing that basically, once we approximate the function, one thing that we consider an approach, because when we're using homomorphic encryption, there is a noise in the computation, and if you want to use bootstrapping approach, the approaches that use bootstrapping are not practical yet. So we came up with an approach that basically we do a noise reduction when the noise reaches a certain threshold. So ideally, we don't want to have any interaction between client and server. That I'll talk about. That's one of the weaknesses of the secure multi-party computation approaches. But for noise reduction, we allow some limited number of communications, as I'll talk. That the number is usually much less compared to the SNC approaches. So these are some of the results that we have for several data sets. So this represents the time that it takes to create the original network, the feed-forward operation, backpropagation. This is the number of communications, and then this is the time that it takes to reduce the noise. And we experimented with different number of hidden layers, so neural networks with hidden layers from 1 to 5. And the time basically starts anywhere from about 3 minutes to somewhere about 20-25 minutes for this is the time that it takes for training. And so this experiment, we used a batch size of 576, but we also looked at if we use larger batch sizes, the increase in the time is not as significant. So for example, if we increase the batch from 282 to 6,000, which is about like more than 20 times, we can see the noise reduction or the backpropagation feed-forward, the increase is less than 50%. Now, if we look at the classification, our result and the number of communication is much better in classification, of course. So again, we look at the networks, the same networks that we train with different number of hidden layers. Here, if we look at the number of communications, it's much less in a lot of cases, up to 3 hidden layers. We don't need any interaction between client and service. But even for the larger data sets that we need, the communication is at the minimum. So we did the experiment with this data, then we moved to a larger data set that are used more in machine learning community. We looked at MNIST, And we train the neural network over encrypted MNIST data. These are the results that we have, again, for the feed-forward, back propagation, the number of communication. So this is the number of interaction and noise reduction. So the times look large, but consider that generally training a machine learning model, even with plain data, takes a lot of time. So over encrypted data, this is not unreasonable. Now, as you mentioned, the other work that exists in the literature is mostly based on secure multi-party computation. There's one work that was done based on homomorphic encryption by Microsoft Research, published in 2016. CryptoNets is the closest to our approach. The main difference is that they only do the classification on the encrypted data. So they essentially build the model on the plain data, then only for classification use the homomorphic encryption. So in order to provide a comparison with that approach, we follow the same procedure. We use the same network that they use. So they have a convolutional neural network with 2 convolutional layers and 2 fully connected layers. They replaced the activation function, which they use sigmoid, with the score function. We used our approach to develop the polynomial approximation. We did use both sigmoid and ReLU as activation function and trained the exact same network. The approximation that we got for ReLU was of the degree 3. For sigmoid is the degree of 2. The accuracy of the model, we were able to achieve 99.15% for the network with ReLU and 99.02% for the network with sigmoid. This was the original functions, original sigmoid and ReLU. And when we replace those with our polynomial approximation, the accuracy drop is very, very low, really. So we dropped from 99.15 to 99.10 for the ReLU, and from 99.02 to 99% for the sigmoid. The best accuracy that CryptoNet they were able to achieve is 98.95%. So one thing you have to have in mind that these numbers look very close, but in machine learning, even a 10% improvement in the accuracy is considered very significant. So they're building a lot of new models to slightly increase the accuracy. So this is still considerable improvement. Another aspect that we looked at is the comparison of the throughput. Our approach significantly outperforms the CryptoNets. So when we did classify with this same batch size of 8,192, our approach can make close to 164,000 prediction per hour. CryptoNet was able to achieve about 52,000 prediction per hour. So that's the homomorphic-based approach. Another approach that we compared closely is based on the secure multi-party computation. This was published in Oakland 2017 by Mohassel and Zhang. So the main advantage that we have, our approach compared to generally SMC-based approaches, is the number of communication, because the SMC approaches, there is a huge number of interaction between the client and server, and we minimize those interactions. So this is, this table shows the huge difference between the number of interactions. So this is the network with 1 hidden layer up to 5 hidden layer here and different batch sizes. If you look at the number of communication for our approach is usually fixed, doesn't change with the batch size, and it's like very low compared to the number of interactions that are needed in the SMC-based approaches. And the largest network that we have with the 5 hidden layer, for example, ours is 640 versus close to 30,000 number of interaction for the SMCs. We also looked at the amount of data that is transferred in the interaction. For the smaller networks, for example, network with 2 hidden layer and with the batch size of 512, the data transferred in the SMC-based approach is 12 megabyte, ours is 33, but if the network becomes larger, our approach outperforms the SMC-based approaches. For example, for a 5 hidden layer and the same batch size, ours is 155 megabyte versus 159. And if We also use larger batch sizes. In most cases, our approach basically has a better, has a less amount of data transferred in the communication. The accuracy of approach also, we were able to achieve 95.15% using the approximation of rail over encrypted data for the MNIST. The approach that they presented was 93.4%. I think I'm going to skip this in the interest of time. So just to sum up, basically our main idea here is to develop solutions to apply neural network algorithms over encrypted data. The main, the core of work is to come up with good approximation, polynomial approximations for the activation functions used in the neural network. And we did some experiment and compared the approach with other SMC-based approaches and homomorphic-based approaches, which in most cases our work outperforms those work. So there's a lot more work need to be done, so we have to work on more complex data sets. So MNIST is a good starting point, but there are larger, more complex data sets that we need to look at. Another aspect for future work is looking at parallelization techniques or GPU-based implementation of machine learning or homomorphic encryption to increase the performance. And that's it, and I'll be happy to take questions.
Okay, we have 3 minutes for questions. I'll try to get to the mic to you, and please speak your question in the mic so they can hear you online.
Hi, nice talk.
Thank you.
There are a lot of different ways to trade off training time in these algorithms, right? So if you have a fixed amount of time to train your neural network, you could like increase the batch size, or in your case, maybe you could use like a higher degree activation function. Like, have you done any experiments to kind of figure out those trade-offs of say like, all right, I've got like 2 weeks to train this thing, and
yeah, so
and
of course,
what's
our goal was to
get
get, so we wanted to get as close as possible to the state of the art. For example, for MNIST in the machine learning community, the state of the art is 99.77%, the best reported result. And we continuously trained our model and we were able to achieve 99.52%. That's the closest that we got. But of course, if you have, so we call it basically, depending on the number of iterations that you train, you usually start from low accuracy, and then as you continue the training, the accuracy goes up. So it depends, you can have a cutoff point basically to say, this is the acceptable accuracy to me, or this is the amount of time that we have, and we're gonna train in this one.
Hi, great talk. I wonder to what degree it can be considered a practical solution, given that MNIST takes about 2 minutes to train on a laptop.
Right. So one thing you have to remember, that training, even on plain text, like big networks that the companies use, they train for months.
That's right, but I'm talking about MNIST,
so
which is 2 minutes.
Set, the one that basically reported 2-3 minutes is the small data set on a laptop. So so even on the encrypted data, it took like a few minutes, which is reasonable. For larger data set, as we saw, it probably goes to hours or like weeks. So depending on what you consider practical, or still, I can't claim that this is really practical. There's a lot more. This is just a starting point. Because homomorphic encryption itself is still, there's a lot of work going on the crypto community on improving the performance of homomorphic encryption. So that's one aspect. So there's a need for a lot more work in this area.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions? Yeah.
From the stream, if the model is available to just one party, the one who encrypts the data, or to multiple parties?
If the model is available to?
If the model is available just to one party, the one who encrypts the data, or to multiple parties, and also if can be queried by multiple users.
Yeah, so that's part of our future work. So the current model, because the client that, if you use specific client's data to build the model, so that client is the only one can use the model for classification. But part of our future work is how to train on a distributed data from several clients, then the model would be usable with larger number of clients. But that's much more complex, of course.
Okay, that'll have to be the last question. Let's thank the speaker again. Okay, our next speaker will be Tal Rabin, talking about privacy-preserving search of patients and genomic data.
So this is joint work with Gilad Sharov, who's at Cornell Tech, Shai Levi, who's at IBM with me, and Linden, who's from Bar-Ilan University. Okay, so we want to discuss the issue of privacy preserving. This mic? So they're either going to hear me or see me. There isn't an option for both of them, I gather. Give her my height. Go this way. Okay. You see, a fellow person who's challenged as I am has a solution. No, it's okay. I need my hands for other things. Okay. So, okay. So I'm going to be talking about privacy-preserving search of similar patients in genomic data. And why are we interested in these things at this point in time, of course, is because sequencing of the human genome is becoming much more accessible. It both takes less time and is cheaper, and we're really starting to have people that we have very valuable and contentful information about their genomes. So we have a situation that any two genomes are fairly similar, almost 99% similar. But in regions where a person might have a disease, then in those regions there might be a lot of variation, which we can learn a lot of information from. And the variations could be in various sorts. There could be insertions of letters, there could be substitutions, and so on. And this area of genomic medicine is really built on understanding the differences between genomes and their correlation, their closeness or difference. Okay, so here's a motivating scenario for what we want to do. There's a patient who has some form of cancer, and they do not want to go through treatments that are not very effective. So they want to know other patients who've had a similar disease, what kind of treatments they had gone through, and whether they were successful or not. But how do you identify which patients are the ones that have a similar disease to yours? You want to look at the genomic representation of the region with the disease in order to determine who are the people that are closest to you. And if you have in that database also the information on what kind of treatment a patient had that's close to the genomic representation, and you know whether the treatment was successful or not, then you have a path for deciding how to treat the current patient and offer better solutions. Okay, so what would be the task? We would have a client who has their genome, and there is the database, which includes the history of patients, let's say cancer patients, where you're looking in the same region that has many variations. And each one of these genomes in the database has maybe the name of the disease that the patient had, and also the treatments that were relevant for that patient, what was successful and what wasn't. And what do we want to do? We want to communicate with this database and find all the K genomes, let's say 5 genomes, that are the closest in some metric, let's say edit distance, from the genome of the current patient. And once we get those, we would be able to administer some treatment for the patient. And how do we want to do this? Because we're interested in privacy. Of course, the client in this scenario is a doctor who has a new patient currently, and the database is held by some hospital who has done a lot of treatments on patients and has more information. But if we want to do this thing in private, we can't have neither the doctor sending the genome of the current person to the hospital, nor the hospital giving the doctor access to its whole genomic database. These things would be very privacy invading, and we want to avoid doing this. So for this, we use a secure computation in order to carry out these operations. Sort of in the same way that the talk previously, they were using homomorphic encryption. We want to use multi-party computation, but the goal is the same, to preserve the privacy both of the patient and of the database. So techniques of secure computation of MPC are more advanced than homomorphic encryptions. However, the generic style solutions are still expensive. But you can do a lot of things with these types of computations, also run machine learning algorithms. You can protect biometrics, genomics, do research on social networks, and so on. But what is the situation? As I said, it's a little bit more advanced than homomorphic encryption. And since the beginning of the 80s, we've already had these great solutions, generic solutions for multi-party computations, which basically tell us that we can compute any function. However, the issue with these solutions are that despite the fact that since the 80s, we've had huge improvements in design of practical multi-party computations, if you just give the generic program a function to compute, it's not going to be that efficient. So the question is, if we decide to look at specific tasks, we know exactly what the function that we want to compute is, can we do much better? And the fact is that we can, in fact, if we try and study the problem and utilize the domain of the specific problem, the question is, can we do much better? And for our setting, what we did was, we had calculated a generic program and how long it would take to run on this specific problem that I had told you. That when you have a client and you have a database and you have to return the 5 genomes that are closest to your patient's genome, this would take hours using a generic MPC. And in fact, our solutions reduced this runtime down to seconds. So really taking it from the realm of impracticality for actual solutions to something that you can actually offer for people to try and get the information that they want. So as I said, even using state-of-the-art, even if you take the best approximation algorithms, let's say I even want to help the generic MPC protocol a little bit, and I'll use the most advanced approximation algorithms for this problem, there would still be 32 billion gates to compute this, and this would take, as I had said, hours. So even if we try to do some optimization prior, you still do not reduce things to a point where it's really practical. So what do? We developed an optimization for this task, which is very accurate. Now you might say, I had said before that we'd use the best state-of-the-art approximation algorithms. Our algorithm is not an improved approximation algorithm for edit distance. This is not the case. It's in this setting when the parties can communicate and do all kinds of things, it's an improved approximation for edit distance. But it does not lead to advances in approximation of edit distance, which is the metric that we use. Okay, it's very fast. And we've managed to shrink the size of the circuit that needs to compute this function by an 80-fold for a single edit distance. So this is a huge advancement. And it's 40,000 times faster than the naive solution. And our actual results enable us to do a pre-processing for a database, and then for each query that a doctor might come and submit to the hospital, so there are multiple doctors who want to get answers, then each answer is returned within 2 seconds. So if you don't want to think about the scenario that there are multiple doctors that are coming and getting answers, then just think about it as 13 seconds total for the hospital to work on its database, the user to work on its query, and then to get the answer. So even if you do not want this amortized thing that you do not consider the pre-processing, even in that setting, our solution takes 13 seconds. Okay. So what are the ideas that drive our solution? The most important, the most expensive portion of our computation is the edit distance computation, that you need to take the query and one element of the database and compute their edit distance in order to start sorting all the genomes in the database according to their distance from this specific genome that we have as our query. This is the most expensive step. It's efficient if you do it in the clear. They're really good edit distance algorithms. But if you have to do it in this MPC setting to preserve privacy, it's very expensive. So what did we want? We decided that instead of doing this computation, as I said before, that the user takes their query and compares it to each element in the database, what we would do is we take a public reference genome, and the client will compare the query to the public reference genome, and the hospital would compare each genome in its database to this public reference genome. Okay, this can be done extremely quickly. As I said, edit distance algorithms are fast, and each one can do it locally on their machine. And but now we're sort of stuck, right? We have the edit distance between the query to the public reference genome, and we have the database with respect to the public reference genome. And the question is, how do we consolidate these separate computations to derive the result? And this, of course, is some of the technical details, which I will not get into, of how we move from this fast computation. And of course, this portion that's in blue is going to now take part with the MPC, but it's going to be a much easier computation whose circuit is much smaller. And you may ask, okay, so how do we get this public reference genome? Is that a privacy invading genome and so on? So I think yes, definitely, the public reference genome is extremely, reveals a lot of information about the people from whom it was generated. Surprisingly enough, I think it's something like 11 or 17 people who live in Albany, in New York, who contributed their genomes in order to create this public reference genome. However, at this point, this genome is public, so we can't say that using it invades anyone's privacy. It's just out there for everybody to be used. And there are other public reference genomes, but we had used this specific one from these 11 people from New York. And that was one idea that we had used. The other thing that we thought of, that when we come to examine the setting of multi-party computations, we should look at every aspect of the specific problem that we're trying to solve to utilize whatever the domain is providing us that could work to our advantage. So in fact, genomic data is extremely repetitive. And many segments, if you look at a cross area like this here, the number of different options of strings that would appear in this area is not very high. I listed here maybe 4 colors, but even on a huge database, if you look at a specific segment, there'll be 20 different options, but not as many as you would think, according to if it was just random strings. So we wanted to utilize this again to reduce the computation time. And it's not just true for the database that it has few options, but also the query, most likely in that same region, will have one of the patterns that is from the set of the database. So what we did is, given that this was the case, we could pre-compute the edit distance between these values, because we know that maybe there's E1 and E2. So these we can already compute the edit distance publicly and take advantage of these computations. These you can do in the clear, and then you would just need a selection property. You would say the database in this segment is E1, and the genome in this section, it was U1, and the genome was U4, and we've already computed what the edit distance is between these things, so we get a huge advantage in our runtime further. Okay, so this is just telling us how many values were possible for a region, and this is just some information that we gathered experimentally. Okay. Now, another thing is, and this might be an issue when you're thinking about privacy, is that we do not compute the exact function. If we said we wanted the top 5 patients that were closest to the, 1 minute, oh, time flies, that we wanted the 5 top patients, our algorithm is not going to give you that. It's going to give you the 5 closest genomes, but maybe within the set of the top 7 genomes. So in fact, you're learning some information. So there are, of course, trade-offs that have to be considered when you're discussing the issues of privacy, whether you want to get the efficiency in runtime, or whether the leakage that happens through this computation is acceptable to you and you're willing to get the benefits of running faster while exposing some information. Okay. So the accuracy of performance really deals with the question of, we return the top 5 out of how many of the actual closest genomes, and we usually were quite close. You can see here that maybe in some instances we returned the 9th closest element instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay. And as I said, there is some leakage, and it has to be assessed whether there's benefits to this leakage to get performance, or maybe things are so private that you should not. Okay. So we used all kinds of algorithmic techniques to create a smaller circuit for computing the K-closest genome question. And one interesting thing, there are some principles beyond, for example, this thing that we added the public reference genome and sort of moved computation locally to each client's computer. Can we use this as a general technique for improving multi-party computations for different problems? We haven't found ways to do it yet, but hopefully this will happen as well. And thank you very much.
Okay, we have time for one question, if there's a question. Yep.
Thank you. That was a great talk. I just have a question. This might be, my intuition might be wrong about this, but what would happen so you have this problem where you have approximation, you have 7 genomes, out of which 5 might be the closest. What if you do the referencing technique with one more different reference? If you have high dimensional data, like it seems that you might end up with the actual set of 5 close points. Like,
I think that we would improve our result, but
Exactly.
we would still might leak.
I see.
Because also, then you have to compute the intersection between the 2 sets that you get
Yes.
here and there. And it could be that both of them also gave the 6th element. It would
I see.
reduce it somewhat, but I think that our
because the
solution-
second set is already much smaller than the original data set, you just have 7 elements.
No, I'd have to run everything against the other genome as well. It would return its own set
I see.
of 5, and then I'd do the intersection. Or maybe I want to return 5, I do 7, 7. It would improve, but I'd still need to address the issue of the leakage,
leakage,
because
okay.
it's not going to give me the perfect answer. So the question is
Is it worthwhile?
leakage
Yeah.
okay or not? And our solutions were so close that
The benefit
maybe you
wasn't
get a
worth it.
small improvement from this, but not a large one.
Thank you.
Speaker again. Speaker is Mohammed Alagan, who will be talking about privacy-preserving Wi-Fi analytics.
Hello. This is joint work with Matthew Kanch and Sebastian Gon, both of which are here today. So most of us walk around today carrying a Wi-Fi enabled. Sorry. Is hello. Okay. Sorry. So most of us walk around today carrying a Wi-Fi enabled device in our pockets, whether it's a smartphone, a tablet, smartwatch. And these devices, everywhere we go, they keep on broadcasting a unique identifier, the MAC address of the device. this is the case whether the device is actually connected to a network or not. Because this MAC address is tied to a device and that device is carried by one person, this kind of information could be captured to measure and analyze human activity. For instance, it could be used to find the number of visitors to a particular location, how often do they go there, and when they go, how long do they stay, and if they want to move from one place to another, which path they are most likely to take. There are a few systems deployed to compute this kind of information. However, the industry standards for this kind of data collection is not good enough. For instance, most companies use simple hashes to protect the MAC addresses from being re-identified. However, it has been shown that these kind of hashes can be reversed just in a few minutes. One of the reasons is that the space of all MAC addresses is just not large enough. What we want to protect is not just the result of the analytics, that is the number of users in the place, but also the internal state of the system to allow us to, so that we don't have to trust the data curator, the person or the entity collecting the data, and also to protect it against potential intrusions or breaches. So in order to do that, the data must be sanitized on the fly as soon as the MAC address is observed. The kind of the definition we try to satisfy is called pan-privacy. It has been introduced in 2010. It's, informally speaking, it's just a property of an algorithm saying that it's both its internal state and output do not change much if one more MAC address was added or removed from a data set. The intention behind this kind of definition is that if the adversary has access to this data, it won't be able to distinguish whether a particular MAC address was in the data set or not. In our approach, we depend on an observation that has been made before, which is that physical mobility analytics could be based upon some primitives, in particular cardinality set operations, like the intersection, the union, and so on. For instance, the number of visitors in a place could be just the cardinality of the set containing the unique identifiers of the people that has been observed in that place. And so the amount of time they spend is just the intersection of the few sets that has been collected over time. So the key idea behind that approach is to design a privacy-preserving data structure that allows us to compute this kind of cardinality set operations while preserving the privacy of the user. This approach is actually agnostic to the data source. It's not limited to Wi-Fi. It can be applied to any system with unique identifiers, including cellular data, like call detail records, which are collected by cellular operators, or even web analytics, in which the identifier, in this case, it could be the IP address. The data structure we design is based on Bloom filters, which we will describe in the next slide, that are perturbed to ensure differential privacy and the pan-privacy property we described before. It's non-interactive. It means that we can collect the data even before we decide what kind of mobility analytic we want to compute. It's decentralized so that the sensor nodes collecting the data do not need a central aggregator or coordinator between them. So a Bloom filter is basically a data structure used to represent sets. It's a bit vector, has two operations, insert and contains. An instance of this data structure is associated with a few hash functions, and for a given element, we pass this element to the hash functions, which point us to a particular bits in the bit vector. To insert the element into the Bloom filter, we set all these bits to 1. To query if an element is in this data structure, we check if all these bits are set to 1. Of course, there is a small probability of false positives because of the hashing collisions, but it gets much smaller when the data structure size is increased. Bloom filters has been extended in 2012 to ensure differential privacy simply by flipping each bit identically and independently at random with a probability less than half. 2 years later, there was a first estimator for the cardinality of the set represented in a blip has been proposed, and 1 year later, an estimator for the intersection of two sets has also been proposed. In our work, we extend blip to support band privacy so that it can be built on the fly. Instead of initializing the Bloom filter with all zeros, we initialize it randomly from one distribution, and when we insert an element, we don't set the bits to 1, we set them randomly but from another distribution. So it's simple to implement, it doesn't incur additional cost except for generating of randomness. And to count the elements of the sets, the intersection, the union, and even higher cardinalities, it suffices to treat the bit vectors as vectors over the integers and add them together. That is speaking for unflipped Bloom filters, to simplify. In case, here this is a Bloom filter which has zeros and has ones, and this is another one, and we add them together. We have a new vector which has zeros, ones, and twos. Then we tally these to get a histogram. The number of locations which has two in them is approximately the intersection of the two sets, and the number of locations which have a non-zero value is approximately the union. Now we cannot do this directly for a flipped Bloom filter because of the noise. So we use a previous work that takes the histogram. So basically we sum the two flipped Bloom filters, we generate the histogram, but then use a previous work to estimate what would the histogram be for the original unflipped Bloom filters. Having this, given that we can add several Bloom filters and do this, we can get any symmetric cardinality. Combining different symmetric cardinalities can allow us to also compute the cardinalities for any combination of the sets, any counting query, basically. We have applied this technique to a Wi-Fi data set provided by Cisco that has been collected in a large European city. It has 1.4 million unique devices, has been collected over 91 days. We created one blip per day, and we tried to see if we can find the temporal patterns. In the first line here, this is the number of unique devices seen each day. The ground truth is in blue, and the red is our estimate. And we can see that the temporal patterns are retained, the weekends, the holidays, and so on. In the second and third line, we compute the intersection of a rolling window of 2 days and 3 days respectively. So the intersection can also retain temporal patterns. We can also compute spatial patterns. For instance, on the same data set, we try to compute the top 10 origin-destination pairs and compare it to the ground truth using the F1 metric, and we've seen that our method, compared to a naive alternative in which we only use the histogram of the flipped Bloom filters without estimating the original values, can find that when epsilon, the differential privacy parameter, is low, hence privacy is high, our method performs significantly better than the alternative. But when epsilon is high, when which the privacy is weak, there is no big difference between the two methods because the flipped Bloom filters and unflipped Bloom filters are basically the same. We also applied this on a different data set composed of HTTP request data for the FIFA World Cup website in 1998. In this case, we have computed the intersection of a rolling window of 30 days. So this is, for each point here, this is the estimate of people who have visited the site this day and continued on visiting every day for the next 30 days. So this shows that we can compute the intersection even for much more than just a few sets. Even though the difference in estimate is is not insignificant, however, the patterns are still there. One thing to note about this technique is that if a user is observed and appears in multiple blips, the more blips the user appears in, the more their privacy is at risk. However, in practice, for the Cisco dataset, 90% of users do not appear on more than 6 blips. For the other 10, they have higher risk. There's some ways to try to minimize this impact. Use, for example, to change the granularity of data collection, either on temporal stage, so instead of days, we can make it weeks, or in space. There's also a different way which can change the hash function used in the Bloom filters and making it secret so that different blips, even if the user is in different blips, they cannot be easily combined together. However, it's not a silver bullet, it has its own drawbacks as well. So in conclusion, we proposed a privacy-friendly technique to compute Wi-Fi analytics, which is privacy-preserving. It's pan-private, so that even an attacker has full access to the system. The privacy of the users are still protected. We have shown that blips can be versatile building blocks for set operations. We provided error bounds, which are not presented in this presentation, but on the paper, which can be of independent interest for the analysis of hashing collisions for any number of sets. We provided promising experimental evaluation, not only on Wi-Fi data, but also for web analytics. One challenge that we are facing is that how to tune the parameters of our data structure to provide optimal results. For instance, the size of the Bloom filter, if it's too small, then the error is high because of higher collisions. If it's too big, the error is also high because of high noise. So the optimal value is somewhere in between, but it depends on the cardinalities of the set, which are not known in advance. For future work, we want to consider designing practical inference attacks so we can evaluate the privacy of our technique even more, allows us to be able to tune the value of epsilon, the privacy parameter. And we want to study more complex physical analytics tasks like traffic forecast, anomaly detection, and otherwise. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay. We have 3 minutes for questions. Are there any questions?
Hi, thank you for the talk. When you say that the re-identifiability increases for a user the more they interact with the system, essentially, is this when they interact, does this hold like when they interact several times with the same sensor, or like the re-identifiability only increases when they interact with a lot of different sensors?
When they appear in more than one blip. A blip is collected in a particular spatial location and also in a particular time duration. So yeah, if they appear in the several time durations or different locations, they are at risk.
Other questions? So I had a question, which was, I didn't totally understand the privacy guarantee, the differential privacy guarantee. Is a differential privacy guarantee applied every time that you're observed? So if you're observed 100 times, your privacy degrades with every additional observation 100 times?
I'm not sure I understand the question exactly.
So the differential privacy guarantee usually applies to a database with a user or without a user, but it sounds like it might be without a user at a specific time being a certain place, and with a user not being at that specific time or specific place.
Yes.
So if I'm seen at 100 different hotspots,
yes,
you might eventually figure out that I'm in the data set, for example.
Yes,
Is
absolutely.
that possible?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, this is one risk that is, yeah, that's true.
Did you tune for that possibility? At one point you'd mentioned that you were measuring intersections of, say, 30 consecutive days.
Yes.
Was that privacy guarantee then provided over 30 days?
The privacy guarantees is basically at the level of one blip. So if users appearing in 30 blips, then they are consuming much more privacy budget, they are more at risk. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks. Yeah, is there any? Okay.
Yeah. Is it right that the ability to delete records from the blips increases as you can delete more records from blips, your privacy is reduced because you can't actually delete from an individual blip. You'd have to delete the entire blip. So like if I wanted to create a TTL for my data, I would have to split it by day, for example.
Yes, the total privacy budget would have to be split among the total number of blips that are produced.
Okay, that will have to be the last question. We're now out of time. Let's thank the speaker again. Okay, thanks. That was the last talk of the session. There'll be a break and then a town hall in 30 minutes.
Oh, sorry, can you swing over my bottle? Thank you. Yep. It's alright, it was kind of an emergency. Yeah. I had to order more from Amazon. I ran out. It's functional. Although once I accidentally screwed the top on roll, not work out well. Yeah, we should. I think I know. We can compile a list. Two of us each catch what's missed done. Find a picture of Sweden, Stockholm.
Hi everyone. Thank you. So we're gathered here today to do the town hall session. I'm here with my current co-chairs, Rachel Greenstad and Damon McCoy, and my co-chair for the next year, Kostas Chatchikokolakis. And you know how the town hall works. We're going to tell you a bit about how this year went, how PETS is going on, and essentially what we want is your feedback. Before moving, a couple of logistics. Remember the hike. Please confirm to the organization if you're going to come or not, because we need to know if we need one bus or two buses, and this is very important. And we are roughly at the number where we may need two, so please confirm soon. And there is a form on your bag that you need to fill for Saturday. You need to give it when you come into the bus that just says that you will not held responsible our guides for anything that happens during the hike. For tonight at the dinner, there is a ticket that you should have received. It should be red, yellow, or green, and that tells which kind of food they're going to give you. And you need a ticket, no food. If you don't have a ticket, then just go back to the organization and they will give you a new one. So first, a bit of a summary of how we run. We have an overarching, very informal organizing committee called the PET Board that is composed by all of the program chairs and the general chairs from previous years, plus a couple more people. It is listed on the website under advisory board. And the PET Board decides every year who are going to be the program chairs, which are in charge of paper selection that goes both into POPETS, the journal, and then are presented at the conference at the end of the year, and also the general chair, who is in charge of logistics and actually makes this happen. and these both people come back to the PET board. And how we choose which proposals to host, we just ask people, the community, to send proposals like we want to help pets in our city, by our university, our company, or whatever, and then we decide. Any questions so far? So for the last 3 years, we have been moving in this continuous model where we have 4 deadlines a year, in May, August, November, and February, and papers are reviewed individually in each of these deadlines. We don't have any kind of idea about acceptance rate or what is going to happen. Every paper is individually reviewed, and we have decisions that are accept, just directly to the conference journal. Shepherd, there will be a period where somebody's going to check that you actually make the changes the reviewer wanted. Major revisions, where the reviewers commit to a series of changes, and if the authors fulfill them, we have a 90% chance that the paper gets in. Resubmit, which means we really like your paper, but you have a bit of too much work to do, just please work a bit at home and send it back. And reject, where we try to tell the people, either you need to work so much that it's going to be a new paper, or this paper really, it hasn't enough contribution, or it's not in scope, and you better go to other places instead of being very frustrated with us and our reviewers being very frustrated with you. So in the last years, these are the statistics. Every bar is 1 year, 16, 17, and 18. The colors represent the different issues: first issue, second issue, third issue, fourth issue. On the very right, my right, we have the total number of submissions. We had a growth between 16 and 17. This year we went down from 230 to 218. We believe that this is a lot the hit of S&P. We know that other conferences like Euro S&P or NDSS also serve a hit in their submissions because S&P is taking everything. What we observed more of a bigger dip was on the accepted papers. So we had 51 in 2016, 52 on 17, and if you remember last town hall, we were discussing how to go double track or single track or more days, and essentially we just had a dip on to 35 papers, which also shows in the acceptance rate. So this year we had an acceptance rate of 70%. We don't really have an explanation of why this happened. We tried to do a lot of analysis about scores, reviewers, expertise. We don't really know what. Any kind of suggestion from your side as authors, reviewers is very welcome. And the other thing is that acceptance rate per issue seems to be stable, which we are very happy about, because that essentially means that we're getting to this goal of papers are reviewed individually and not as a global thing or seeing about how other papers go. Every paper is judged on its own merits. And a bit of how decisions are distributed. So this pie chart shows how our decisions are given. Blue is accept, so we have very few papers that have a straight accept. Then we have a 13% of a shepherd. In total, they make this about 17% of acceptance papers. Yellows are major revisions. Greens are reject and resubmit. This, we like your paper, but you need to work a bit too much. And reject are just plain rejects. Please maybe find another venue. And overall, we have a 17% acceptance rate, but we only have a 10% for the first shot. First shot means the first time you submit the paper, you have only a 10% of getting in. If it's a major revision, so when these people give you this very concrete set of changes, then this chance increases to 63%. And for this reject and resubmit, when they come, they have a 26% acceptance rate, so it's much higher than any of the other ones. But we must say that we have observed that fast resubmits, so when you have a reject and resubmit and you just submit directly to the next issue, they have far lower acceptance rate. So the R&R is something serious where the reviewer is trying to signal that this paper needs work, and it's very unlikely that you can do this just in between the rejection deadline and the next submission deadline. So think about it very hard, think about the message they are giving you. Sometimes just waiting for another 3 months, that's why we have this continuous model, may actually help you a lot on both sides, review and frustration and author frustration, but just putting a bit more work on the paper and making sure that you're addressing the changes. And 26% of them are directly accepted, but also 26% are kind of upgraded to the major revision that then would have a 63%. So what this tells us is that some of the papers we have spend a couple of cycles, 2-3 cycles, coming again and again into the PETS review system. And just another note, last year we had a couple of comments here at the town hall that our scores were very binary and we couldn't have, the reviewers could not express very well all of the dimensions of the paper. So we added some optional scores which were significant. So how big of a gap is this new result? Is something that was expected? Is something that's going to change the field? Originality, like if this is a very novel idea, or is this something that somebody had to do at some point? How far from ready the paper is. It's not the same thing that it's a very good idea and we really want it, but it needs work on the editorial side, for instance. And also the likelihood to have discussion, to support discussion here, which is also very important for us because we're here to discuss the state of the art in privacy technologies. On the top we have the accepted ones, on the bottom the rejected. Observations are that accepted papers are judged more significant by reviewers. Originality and suspected, we don't have something very high. We don't have that many super original papers that are breakthroughs. These are difficult actually to produce, so it's not a very surprising results. Accepted papers in general for Frankfurt Ready, you see they are very ready on the top right, while for the rejected we have a bunch of unexpected, but many of them are just really not ready to be published. And likelihood of discussion, where the PETS community, all of them score super high, no matter what, no matter how. A note, external reviewers, we need you. We have more submissions every year, more topics every year. So for some topics we have a lot of people, like anonymous communications. For some other topics like usability, we have very few. No matter what you do, no matter what your expertise is, we need you. Please come and sign up. If you have doubts about what the reviewing process entails or what an external reviewer is, we are 4 people. Ask now or come to us during the break.
You can nominate yourself, you can nominate your students.
Yes, your friends, your family. Your mom can nominate you, it's gonna be fine.
Or
if your mom is an expert, we also want your mom. So some questions that we had are decision semantics clear? When we say this reject and resubmit, reject or whatever, do you guys understand it? Do you think like, what do they want from me? Just please help us make this clear. Is acceptance rate something important to you to choose PETS as a venue? Is something we should be caring about or not? Do you want it low? Do you want it high? And then are these revisions, is this process where some papers spend a lot of time really worth it? Both from the point of view of the authors, of the point of view of our reviewers. How do you feel about it? Is this frustrating? Is this good? Is this bad? What do you think about rebuttals? Rebuttals take a lot of time for everyone. You have to write them. Reviewers have to read them. We have to forward them to the reviewers. So are they useful for you? Do you think it's something we should keep doing? Or are they just a waste of time and we just can't skip them? We had a workshop on Monday, super successful. There was a lot of people. Is this good? Is this bad? What kind of event would you prefer to have? We can try to make something nicer. We have broadened a lot in topics. I think this shows on the sessions, on the program. Should we keep broadening? Are you missing something? Or this has become too broad? Do you think we should narrow back down to something more concrete? And in general, what works and what doesn't? We want to hear from everyone, like what is their feeling about our process, how we organize the conference, how we convey the information, anything you have. And if you know, this year we're running this PET experiment in which we're trying to evaluate the randomness of the review process. We have 2 independent PCs that judge a bunch of the papers that you have submitted, and then we're gonna compare how these 2 independent sets of people judge the paper. And if somebody has any question, just come to us, Kostas and myself, or just ask today. Thank you very much. Who want to start? We have a couple of mic runners around.
Thanks, Carmela. So shall we go question by question, or?
I think it's whatever you guys want to discuss.
So related to the first question, for example, I have some problems understanding the difference between rejects and reject and resubmits. So it seems we provide very few rejects, right?
Well, 32%.
including resubmits, you mean?
No, the difference between reject and resubmit. So
Yes.
Plain reject.
So that is one issue. And do you have any, let's say, numbers on rebuttals? So is there a change, let's say, before the rebuttal and after the rebuttal? Maybe within the experiment, what we can do is we can ask the reviewers to agree on, let's say, a decision before the rebuttal and then after the rebuttal, and then measure the change within the experiment.
This would be really a little difficult to do just because the rebuttals typically happen right after the reviews come in before there's been any discussions. So it's pretty hard to sort of distinguish the changes in opinions that come from the review, from the rebuttal versus the changes that come from just the discussion among the committee members.
And my view on rebuttals, but maybe I want to hear what people think before, I don't know. So to me, what makes, I don't know if it makes a huge change in the decisions, to be fair. Sometimes it does, like we see people saying, oh, I'm convinced or I now think. But what it really changes is the meta review and how the reviewers approach the next submission, or if they want a next submission or not. That makes a huge difference. And in this sense, rebuttals in this process are kind of different than the ones that you have on CCS or on these one-shot processes, because they shape the future of the paper. Like maybe the you know, not the short term, what is happening on this issue, but what is going to happen on the next one.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of cases where in the with the rebuttal, what will happen is it won't necessarily, it'll change sort of whether like it's like, okay, well they had this really concrete rebuttal, so we think we can shepherd it because they've said very clearly what they're going to do, and if they do that, that's good, or yeah, that fits within the major revision, or maybe, okay, so they don't seem to get our point, so maybe that's more of a reject and resubmit. So I think it does affect kind of the discussion about the meta review a lot. That's where I've seen it come into play.
Yeah, two comments here. So the one thing is that it's important, so the response in the rebuttal gives, I think, important message about the intentions of the authors. I mean, are they really willing to, work towards what the reviewers are asking? So that's important. And the second thing is that because of this, format of the reviewing, I mean, all these questions are more complicated because, I mean, asking whether it changes the outcome of this issue is one thing, but whether it also changes the outcome in 2 rounds or 3 rounds is another thing. So it's hard to measure. So overall, I think that it's I mean, maybe it doesn't change necessarily like the outcome as a grade of the first round, but definitely affects the outcome overall.
I mean, for the overall, they will have chance to respond to reviews anyways, right? For the revision or resubmission.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a discussion there, right? I mean, because of this model. So I mean, the rebuttal just, like the response adds just another step in the discussion between the authors and the reviewers. Then there is, of course, the revision. Then you can, send a summary of the changes you have done, and so.
We've got a couple people raising their
I mean,
hands.
just let me say this. This experiment is very nice, I think, that for this upcoming year. And just within the experiment, if we can conduct something related to rebuttals, it would be great for the community, not just for pets. I mean, there are many conferences employing rebuttals. So if we can somehow experiment with that as well, we can deduce a lot of great information. Thanks.
We can try to do that, but again, like the thing is that we have a different decision model than those conferences, and therefore I don't think that it's going to be extrapolatable to whatever they do.
So it's a thing about what you said, Kostas, that the rebuttal might signal whether authors are willing to do some changes. I mean, that's not really what typically rebuttals are supposed to. That sort of conflicts with the guidelines of rebuttal, right? So including what's written on the email that we get, right? So rebuttals are meant to clarify mistakes or raise inconsistency. I mean, if now we have to promise stuff, maybe we should update our the guidelines that you sent, huh? I mean, this is
No,
important.
I think that what Costas means, when you say the intention, is this clarification makes a huge difference on what the meta review is going to ask for something very big or something very vague. It just gives you an opportunity to actually cross points out of the meta review of changes that they're going to ask from you and shape the thing. It's a clarification at the end of the day.
This is not clear. This is not clear.
So you're
I don't
saying
get
you
it.
should change, so is this the instruction that
No, if
goes-
you use a rebuttal like this, then authors should know, right? Because, the guidelines right now say clarify mistakes in, and
So this is
right?
instructions to the authors, we should...
Yeah, the
Yeah.
instruction of the authors.
Yeah.
Okay, ask somebody to...
Yeah, if I may, I think it kind of follows from the clarification in the sense that if the authors say, oh, but this review point is not important, and oh, that's too difficult, and oh, we'll just say that this is out of scope, then this is giving information.
Yeah,
You're clarifying,
But
right?
Daniela has
Yeah.
a good point, because the point is that, necessarily, since part of the discussion in the reviews is, whether, we maybe give a major revision, right? The discussion often is begun between major revision and general submit. So there is discussion about whether the authors will implement
Yeah,
things. So
but-
necessarily, the response will be interpreted in this way. So you're right that since it will happen anyway, we should, in the instructions,
should-
clarify that.
Yeah, we should let people know. But like an example that I saw was like sort of, where there might be some question about some methodology in the experiments that came up in the reviews, and then that's something that gets clarified in the rebuttal that feeds into the discussion about whether the reviewers think the experiments need to be rerun. So like this is, yeah.
I think it's a point.
More questions? Comments, suggestions? Are we so good?
So if you go back to, so one of the questions was, what do we want the rate to be, the accept rate to be? So I guess for people who don't know PETSERM, it's maybe making a decision on like your tenure or whatever, they might care about that number. The lower it is, the more prestigious this conference is that you publish at, so that's really cool. But the people here, I tend to think it's more like, oh, people I work with know that this is a good conference, so that's who I care about. But maybe I'm not thinking long-term enough yet to be like, I'm going to be judged by people who don't know this conference at all, right?
Well, that's the main question. Like, what are people's feelings? What do they... Sorry, that's actually the question. We know that there are very different people. We can have an opinion, but we're also, as you said, internal people of the process. We feel very attached to this conference. But is this good, bad? Should we care about it? Should we not? Because...
I think acceptance rate is kind of an indicator, but I don't think we should obsess about it. And the question is, do we feel that we're rejecting papers that are actually good? Or do we feel that we're accepting papers that are actually an embarrassment to have?
Yeah. One thing that's I think the core of it. And another question, I guess, with this graph here is, do people feel like papers are spending too long in this process? Do people feel like it's a discouragement to submit to PETS because, there might be a long road ahead, kind of?
Or an acceptance rate that is too low, what's the...
Or do we think it's good?
On a different topic, I really enjoyed the Monday event because there were a bunch of lightning talks and there were posters and people got to talk in very, 5-minute chunks about what they're interested in, and other people got to learn what that was. So I think it was great in an introductory sort of way, but I'm curious from the students and other people who actually participated on Monday, did they think it worked and helped? Do they know more people now? Did other people learn what they are working on? Was that a success from the participation side of things?
I wanted to...
Paul
here. Sorry. Yeah. I'm jumping back to what Rachel was saying that I think it's useful to point out not just that it's a long process, but it's a lot different from being on the treadmill of, oh, you submit someplace and maybe the paper gets rejected and then you make a bunch of revisions to your paper and you pull some stuff out and put some new stuff in based on what you're told, and then you submit someplace else and they say,
why did you have all this stuff? What I'd really like to see is that thing you pulled out. And what we're doing with this longer process is giving people less of a moving target, and maybe that takes a while to go through. So, I mean, I'm not saying, no, we're better. It's still an open question, but I guess I just wanted to make sure the question was considered not just in the context of this takes longer, but also that it has a greater chance of, both better papers because it's getting refined as it goes, but also more a clearer process in the end.
So I have a quick suggestion and then a question. The suggestion is you've asked several times for feedback from the community, and it's kind of difficult to do in this format, especially. I do recall I got a survey from Oakland one year. They were like, "Oh, you submitted a paper to us. How was our reviewing process?" And I had lots of comments about that. So I think that if you regularly ask people, they would submit their responses about their experience with pets. I don't think that you're doing that. It seems easy. People get surveys all the time these days. I mostly ignore them, but this is something that I think that authors who've put a lot of time into submitting would actually do, so that might be a better way to gather data. So that's a quick suggestion. A question is, I'm wondering if there's been any discussion or thoughts about code being attached to any submissions. I haven't seen any movement on this lately. I'm wondering if this is something that we still care about. I'm frequently looking for this kind of code. Is this something that the conference is going to facilitate?
So yes, it is something that we're working on, and in fact, we are starting to ask for code.
And there are some papers that
Yep,
aren't here because there aren't code.
and there is one paper that isn't here because of code issues.
So just on that topic, like a number of countries, Canada currently has a rule that any federally funded research has to be available open access. And they are currently soliciting comments on a new proposed rule that not only is the paper open access, but all your data and code have to be available as well. And this is new and it may not happen. They're soliciting comments. I think it's a really exciting new direction. And you may see more papers including links to code just from that reason.
Yeah. I assume that data doesn't include human subjects data.
Exactly. So there are exceptions for data that has to be private for obvious reasons, but all the data output by your shadow simulation or whatever.
I mean, our approach tends to be more kind of like, is the data or the code sort of central to the contribution of the paper? And that's something that the reviewers and the chairs kind of figure out in terms of whether for this particular paper, the contribution requires that.
Right.
Yeah, going back to the multiple rounds of revision and the fact that papers don't get on the first shot, but they kind of go through multiple stages. I think, of course, there is an added cost for reviewers and authors, and it takes more time. I would add to the reason that Paul mentioned that there is a more predictable path to acceptance, that I would expect this process to produce better, more polished final papers that are higher quality. And in that sense, I would like to hear from people who have reviewed or major revisions or submitted papers that had major revisions, whether they feel that the major revision process actually led to a much more polished and high quality outcome in the end than it would have been otherwise if it would have been just quickly shepherded and accepted or not going through this process. And I'm saying this because, I mean, one can have the culture of like, there's a bit this culture of like trying to have I understand there's this race of as many publications as fast as possible, all of this. But I think part of training scientists is also to do proper work that goes all the way to the end and is polished and is really nailed down and good. And that sometimes takes a few rounds of work and it's not for free, right? So do we want to aim for final quality? I think that's important. Of course, we don't want to tax people to the extent that it becomes, too much and they stop submitting. But I was wondering if people want to comment on that as authors or reviewers of major revisions.
to clients, Claudia, so I have been on papers where there were major revisions, and yeah, some papers did feel like they got better, but I think there was a feeling that it felt like attrition, as long as they could keep up with whatever changes you asked, and then maybe the second time they were submitted, there was this feeling that maybe if they do everything you said, then we have to accept, which I guess you're not supposed to do that, but there was this feeling that, well, this is a checklist we gave them, and yes, they've, done the things, but the overall thing isn't like that much more polished. It's just more what we asked them to do. Maybe our list wasn't good initially, right? But it just feels like well, we told them to do this, and now they've done it. So what can you say, right? So this is the part where the major revisions just feels like, can I just say, nope, sorry, you spent an extra cycle, but we must have messed up in our list at some point. And sorry for the waste of time.
Well, I was going to go in a different direction, so you want me to wait? Yeah.
So I've been on a few of the review committees where the committee's vote was sort of split on where to go. And so there was a lot of discussion within the committee, back and forth, as we tried to convince ourselves, are we going for major revision? Are we going for, what's the second category, or Shepherd? Are we going for reject? And I found that the result of the discussion ended up, I thought, with a better paper in the cases where we did accept, because we had to argue with each other first. And so my experience is different than yours, dear. And I come at it having done, by choice, a lot fewer program committees and a lot more editorial work than most people here. I much prefer doing journal editorial, where you're doing this over and over. So I found it valuable, Claudia.
Okay, so I would like to go in a different direction, a different topic, if I may. So the four people on the stage know this, but most of the rest of you don't. IEEE Security and Privacy Magazine has for a number of years done special issues about highlights from the IEEE Security and Privacy Conference, the Oakland Conference. So magazine versions of some of the papers from the conference. And we've decided we want to do this for not just the S&P conference, but other conferences also. And PETS was the first conference other than S&P that we decided to approach. And so as the Associate Editor-in-Chief, I approached the PETS board and we discussed it. And we ultimately concluded not to do it because IEEE has a copyright policy that would not allow publication of the magazine versions of the articles on the PETS website. People could publish the papers in the magazine and they could have them on their personal websites, but they couldn't put them on the PETS website. And so I wanted to raise this as a way of asking the community as a whole how you feel about this. Would you rather have the opportunity to have a magazine version, but you wouldn't be able to have it on the PET site, or would you rather that we just not do that? Could we have a link on the website, on the PETS website to the IEEE site? Yes, but it would be behind a paywall. It would be behind the IEEE paywall, yes. Other questions, and then I'll toss it back to the board and anyone else who wants to comment.
And Damon and Rachel can correct me, but when we discussed this, kind of a reason to say no was not about what is the link. What is the link is important, but it's also that many of the people in this community, and maybe many of the reviewers we have committed to no review to closed or paid magazines and things like this. So we felt it kind of not correct to then say that the work that they had done to select these papers would fit in actually something that they have not committed, that they have committed not to do. And that was kind of the main driver of this issue.
I apologize, I misunderstood.
But I mean, on the flip side, it would get more exposure for these papers. And so we would definitely like to hear your feedback as to, do you feel that we made the right decision in this case?
So I had one quick question about the 63% on major revision. Does that so I mean, how many papers are not even resubmitted? Like, I guess this includes
I don't have that number.
papers that are
I don't have
resubmitted.
it.
Huh?
We don't have that number.
Okay. But this includes, it's only papers that are resubmitted, right?
Yes.
Okay. Right. And so then just one.
Last year. So we had the number last year, and I believe it was 2/3 or more.
Resubmitted.
Resubmitted.
Okay. And then one thing that Tariq said about, these major revisions, like, I mean, I think that's a valid point. I would add one thing is that then it really depends on whether you get the same reviewers or not. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't, right? And, then...
Mostly you do. With
right?
major revision, mostly you do.
Because what you said, right? You kind of feel like you have to accept it now, but then maybe not. And then if there is another, like a new reviewer, it's not clear. I have reviewed papers as there were major revisions, resubmissions that I did not review in the first place, and I wasn't sure what was
Are you sure about that? Major revisions, we never assign anybody new.
Rejected resubmits that tend to get you.
No, it happens.
We do occasionally.
It happens. Like somebody is no longer available, or a conflict as a reason, it does happen.
Yeah.
It's very rare.
It's rare, but it does.
It's rare, but yeah, but we're trying definitely. So basically, when you are invited in the PC, you have to commit that even after you go away from the PC, like maybe after a year or 2 years, 3 years, then at least for the papers that you have given a major revision, so you have committed to still review them even after you're out from the PC.
So normally what causes a new reviewer on a major revision is either a new conflict with an older reviewer or the previous set of reviewers felt that they needed new expertise to review.
But now, the PC is also split in two, right? With the experiment, so.
Yes, but
right.
Major revisions from previous years, they have not duplicated, they're not duplicated in the experiment.
Yes.
But anyway.
Sarah?
Yeah, so I mean, I've also been in that situation, and I mean, I have to say it's quite awkward. As Emiliano said, there's kind of this pressure, like, I mean, you feel bad, right? These authors have been in this submission cycle for a while, and you don't want to be the one to like kill it, So one comment, I guess, about this reject and resubmit rate. I mean, one way to address the fact that fast resubmits have a lower acceptance rate is to kind of actually like codify that, and so do something like Oakland does, where you essentially say, if you get this, then you can't submit. You can't just turn around and submit right to the next issue. You have to like skip an issue or something like that. So I don't know if you've considered that.
We considered that. At the end of the day, we have the summary of changes where, like we make the reviewers go through that, and we kind of go through the faith of the people that they are going to do it, because we don't want to do actually the Oakland thing where you have to wait for I don't know what, because different people have different speeds of working, they have different ways of doing things. Some papers can actually be fixed, some papers cannot. The numbers here is what we saw, and we say like in general R&Rs, that resubmitting one round tend not to be accepted, but some of them do. So we just don't want to impose something that has nothing to do. Also, it depends very much. It's a one-author paper, it's a 10-author paper. We just don't want to do that.
Yeah, I mean, and there are cases, where the one round sometimes does work if the authors submitted it and they'd kind of been doing some of those experiments anyway because they thought maybe later they'd want to do that, and it sort of just aligns. Sometimes it works, but in general, so we don't want to be a hard and fast rule, but in general, I think the message we want to say is like take that seriously.
Yeah. Also, just also a quick comment on this major revision issue and whether there's pressure. So, I mean, yeah, it's hard to balance everything, but what we are trying to do is really, we should not give the impression that once you get a major resubmit, then automatically this means that, you change just a little bit, I mean, you really need to improve the paper. I mean, this is about quality. So it's not automatic. And I think 63% acceptance rate on the major resubmits, means that there are many cases where the reviewers say, you did these changes, but still,
Yeah. But I do think, this is an area where a lot of the times where we saw these kind of problems, not always, but in the 2 years that I did this, where the reviewers gave a major revision, but like kind of fell down on the creating the good meta review, because that is like when you give a major revision decision as a reviewer, there's sort of a, you know, you do have to really think through like what changes would actually make it, you know, on this path, and try and manage expectations for yourself in the future as well. So, and it's not going to be perfect, and that's why you don't have like 100%, right? But, you know, but a lot of times when papers got major revisions that didn't get accepted, it's not because, you know, they did the things, it's because they didn't do the things, right?
So related to this again, I think the authors misunderstand reject and resubmit as major revision in that sense. And if there is nothing that prevents a reject to be resubmitted at a later call, then I guess this is confusing rather than helping.
I think it's helpful that as a signal to the authors as to whether, you know, we think it could be on that path. I guess 2 years ago was when we created the reject and resubmit decision, and I think that was really it was very hard before that, because you only had the different, like the major revision and the reject, and there was no, you know, and then there was all this question of like trying to create meta reviews that sort of nuancedly communicated where you were, and having that statement, I think has been helpful, but I would like to hear from the community about that.
And I still think personally that the meta review is very important, and actually right in there trying to convey what was the result of the discussion and exactly what you mean by this thing, because the score is not the most important at the end of the day. We give the reviewers the opportunity to explain exactly what they mean, so please use it, because it actually improves a lot the experience for everyone that is involved on the process, because then we don't have these misunderstandings, papers don't come back too early, or papers come back. So the more you can actually explain there, our impression is that this improves a lot in the long run. Yeah.
I mean, I think that the confusion is easy to clarify by explaining in the email what the decision means in clear terms, right?
No,
Like-
because no, I disagree with that. Because the decision doesn't mean always the same thing.
Well, but saying like your paper has received a reject, we believe that this paper might not be adequate for this venue. Your paper has received a reject or resubmit. This is a rejected paper, but you know the reviewers think that if you revise it, there is chances that it might be acceptable in a future version. I mean, it's not.
But there are a lot of nuances there in the discussion about what exactly does it mean that. Then some people want to really reject, but they actually feel it's in the scope. There are a lot of things that there is this little thing that makes a huge difference, and this one and these two are blurry, and the only way for us to distinguish them is ask people to write in the meta review what you mean.
Yeah, but if I understand the confusion is that people who get a reject and resubmit, they believe they got a major revision. I understood this is the confusion. So I think this is something that can be explained in clear terms, and people
Yeah.
should be able to understand it, right?
It's like, yeah, I mean, maybe actually, do you guys think it would be helpful, like if in the, like, you know, result email that you get, there's like, these are the decisions that you could have gotten, and this is the one you got. Would that actually help?
And can I ask a more concrete question? Are these emails too long? Do people read these emails?
No.
This is a very important
No.
question.
Yeah, because I mean, we could add more, but
we could add more, or we could remove. Like, do you really feel like is the information there conveyed, or do you?
For reference, and I think having either in the email or a link to on the website what the possible decisions are and what you got, because sometimes like you send it to a conference and you get back like say the early reviews or even the final reviews, you get back and it was a 4. And sometimes there's a word attached. Sometimes there's not even a word attached. And you have no idea what is it even out of. Right? Is it 4 out of 10? Is it 4 out of 10? Is it 4 out of 5? Is it 4 out of 4? Right? And So having more explicitness about the set of possible outcomes is something I've complained about at many conferences. And if we can improve that here, that would be simple and great, right? You could either put it in the email or just a link to
something on
I
the
think,
website.
like we have a discussion of it on the website.
Right, but not
Yeah, but-
everyone even knows.
No, exactly. So at
You mean
least
in
just
the
a link to
notification,
that
right?
page
Yeah.
in the reply email
Yeah.
costs nothing, right?
Yeah.
So, so multiple points. One is, yeah, these are all great suggestions, and we can tweak the user interface, as it were, of this whole thing, and maybe reject and resubmit. I mean, part of the reason we chose that was because we thought, you know, we could have just called those reject and called the other ones, you know, reject with strong prejudice. But this is a little bit, you know, nicer. And maybe you want to say open to resubmission or something, but then that's too many words. So we could tweak that. It's also important to recognize no matter what we do, it's not going to be perfect, and some people are going to misunderstand, or even if we put in the link, they won't read it. So not everybody's going to, you're still going to have some confusion no matter what you do, and you should not try to fix that by trying to make yourself perfect. So that's one thing. To what Tariq was saying earlier about the major revisions, and this got talked about in various ways, but I do think that it is on the reviewers and the committee to be essentially making a decision on the first submission. I mean, if this were the one-off type conference, then you're making an accept or reject. And if we think that, it's not going to, you know, maybe you made a wrong decision or you didn't. But if you make a major revisions decision, and then they go through, and you all agree that that they did what you said, even if you think, oh gosh, we kind of should have said something else. I mean, we can quibble about the semantics, but my view is no, you have to take it. You blew it the first time. And so if you're giving them major revisions and you honestly believe that they did it, then that should mean that the paper is in, even if you're, you know, later regret that having come to that. And that's what major revisions should mean. And so I assume that the 2/3-ish acceptance rate is primarily from people who didn't actually do what they were supposed to.
Yeah, because it's not a Boolean thing, right? I mean, so you have also to decide whether they have done the. So I totally agree with what you said. I mean, just with the remark that, yeah, it's up to the reviewers to decide whether they're satisfied with how the.
Right, but my point was just that for the papers where you do think, oh, they did everything we said,
Totally agree.
but we should have said,
No, no,
you know,
no,
something
this is-
else, or
no.
yeah, they did it, and now we look at it and we think, yeah, even though they did it, we're not so crazy about the paper. Well, you should have said that the first time, and that's on you.
Yeah. So
Um,
Jean had a
Okay.
in the back. Yeah, if you guys can make sure to. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Okay, so quick question.
We'll look at that.
Quick question. So
So-
is it possible to get a major revision and say, I don't want to submit this as a major revision, I want to submit this as if you had rejected it? I want a completely different set of
Yes,
people?
absolutely, send us an email.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, because you are doing this experiment with the
You
A,
can-
B, and
yeah,
all
we
that.
decide
Yeah.
everything, it's fine. If you don't really want to have the same people, send us an email, we'll discuss it, and we'll take this up on a case.
That's a good point.
So I've heard 3 or 4 suggestions, and I am a big fan of actionable reviews. And it would be perhaps useful to address both the issue of meaning of numbers and what is a major revision. If you could perhaps offer publicly for both reviewers and submitters, what should a review look like that says, all right, here is the, you know, here is the list, and here's a couple of sentences under what each of these mean, and here's your 3 boxes, and here's what's appropriate in these 3 boxes. So for example, as a reviewer, you know, you don't have that now.
Is on the About Reviews section on the website is not what you're
Yeah,
talking
the About Reviews section, for example, doesn't include the numbers or what the specific indicators of the numbers mean, or, you know, there's no reason not to have, you know, summary descriptive statistics about what you get. Well, look, you know, this is what, you know, these are kind of your assumptions going in. And there's also another discussion going on in another review committee whether or not you should be expected to know, for example, tech reports. Can a reviewer say, well, you don't know about this tech report or this Cornell University library report? And that's not something that's made clear. And speaking of clarity, I do not think it's legitimate to ask people to know about tech reports or something that's only in the Cornell University library. Maybe the board feels differently. It's your place to decide, but we should kind of know, both as reviewers and authors going in. That may be helpful to others.
In terms of the tech report thing, the way that we've generally been handling that in the pets community, in the pets committee, is that you know, if something isn't published in an actual venue, then you sort of can't hold it against the authors. But that they didn't talk about it, but we could ask them in shepherding or whatever to sort of contextualize it with this other thing if we think it will make it a stronger paper in terms of the impact long term, but you don't like reject something because of that.
You know, like I said, whatever is fine with me as the board. You know, you decide, that's your job, thank you for your service. But it's the kind of thing that should be made clear. That's an example of something that should be.
We'll add it to the About Reviews. Thanks.
Thanks.
So I agree with you that meta reviews are very important, and I think it's a very good feature of pets. But with the meta reviews, I think the distinction between reject and reject with resubmit should be left to the authors rather than the committee. I mean, with the reading the review, the author can decide whether or not to submit.
You can resubmit.
You will say that, of course, they are free, but what I am saying is they understand reject and resubmit as if it's a major review. I think that's creating the confusion
We
rather
have
than helping.
discussed this. We will add something. We will add this framing of other things, and we can even say this is not the major revision. We can be more clear about what it is not. That we could do.
I don't think it's a naming or clarification issue. I mean, it's up to the author, right? They can read the reviews and they can decide, okay, if I resubmit, I should have a good chance versus maybe I will try a different venue.
It is up to the authors. I mean, the authors you're welcome to resubmit a rejected paper. Everything is up to the authors in that regard.
Of course.
This is just trying to add more communication to the authors about what the reviewers were thinking. And I think most authors, but people can correct me if I'm wrong, even if it's imperfect, like to have a little bit more insight into that when making those decisions.
So I wanted to comment on the code aspect. So I don't know if you're familiar. In ACSAC, for example, started now what they call artifact submission. But it's optional, totally optional. After the paper is accepted, the authors are encouraged to submit their code or data. And there's a subcommittee that verifies and then makes it publicly available. So I don't know if you think something like that would be useful to the pets community.
We thought about it, and so far we don't have the infrastructure to do that. We couldn't come up with a good infrastructure to do that. And we can put it on the pipeline of things to do, but then we need somebody that should be in charge. And if we do that, that's going to take a bit of time.
Yeah, anyone excited?
A chair.
Just saying.
One more chair. Yeah, so I was just going to add, like, if you have people putting up their code, it happens often with Gradware that it just doesn't work. Well, it doesn't work for the person who's not the person who wrote it. And then they have to contact that person and be like, how do you make this thing run? And they're like, oh, you're doing everything I've done, I don't know why, and it turns out because they had a library installed and you didn't have it, and it was, so it seems like a really difficult thing to get code working.
So so that's what that subcommittee basically does. So they work with the others to verify the code and the data to make sure that runs compiles properly. And the authors also commit to at least keep the code on their whatever website they have until the day of the conference for a few months at least. So people have the opportunity to download and work with them. I mean, it's not perfect solution, but something might work.
I mean, regarding that, there's also sort of an intermediate step where you incentivize code sharing, right? So for instance, I know like CCR, they give you extra pages if you have, if you share code and you include like an appendix where you explain how to reproduce your results. Or, some other conferences, like you can only, be eligible to Best Student Paper Award if you make your code available, right? So have you guys considered that?
It's something I think that's been considered a little bit. I think the thing that we've been thinking through is that there isn't a lot of, because of the broadness of PETS, because we have, we've got crypto papers and we've got systems papers and we've got a bunch of things like the one size fits all kind of approach doesn't seem to be appropriate. We have human subjects papers. It's like not everything is.
So yes, I wanted to have two small comments. So one regarding what I think Roger said before. So I'm one of the person that gave a talk on Monday, and obviously in 5 minutes there is not enough time to give all your ideas, all the work that you do. But I think giving these 2-3 keywords or these 3 main ideas, it helps a lot to have conversation later over the week. And I think that the fact that it's in Monday actually helps a lot in the sense that you have the rest of the week to talk to people and people know what you do. I think it's really useful.
Pet speed dating, as it were.
Yeah, exactly, like a pet dating or something.
And by
like
the
that.
way, this workshop on Monday has been over the years something that happens depending on who on the local place says, I want to do a workshop on A. So if you have an idea, submit it to the board would consider it, but it's not a closed thing that you can just submit your idea and we will consider it, and if it is good, we make it happen.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if it's the workshop or pet speed dating or call it X, but I think it's really useful. And the other small comment is on this external review process. I think also external review this cycle. I think it's also really useful as well. I'm curious if you think of it as a teaching experience for the new reviewers. And if so, I have the suggestion that apart from us to give reviews, it would be good if you give us feedback about how we did, in the sense that probably we are not really expert in the reviewing process. So it could be good if we have feedback about the length of the feedback, the tone that we use, the type of language that we use, these type of comments, whether our arguments are good enough to go for reject or not, or who knows. Some kind of feedback from somebody who knows more than us.
Suggestion, we'll see how we can implement that.
Well, the rating reviews is...
Yeah, following up on what was just said about the short talks, it makes me think whether, and the fact that giving these short talks then enables people to better talk to others during the conference, it makes me wonder whether the ramp session should meet on the first day and not on the last day.
Well, I actually kind of like this approach that we've got operandi on the first day, and then because sometimes people have things they want to discuss as things come up.
But I mean, there are a lot of more people on the ramp session speaking, right? So if we do it like on the afternoon of the first day, for example, that would enable people in the second and third days to already have an idea of what everybody is doing. I mean, I'm just putting this, I just had the idea when I was listening to that comment.
That makes sense. We can try in Stockholm and see how it goes, and then we decide based on data. Andre?
Okay, so given that this is a town hall, I think there are way too much time taken up by program committee and board members, but anyway, nevertheless. I think lots of conferences do surveys at the end, right, to get exactly this kind of feedback, right, that you're asking, was Monday good, rather than having people speak up, actually, right, we could put a form up, right, with all the kinds of questions that you want answered, but also all the feedback, right? I mean, did we get the balance right? Did we get the rump session right? Did we get the Monday thing right? Where is hot pets these days anyway? Right? Was the hike any good? All that sort of thing, right? I think you could do easily quantitatively, and given the engagement in this community, I think you'll get a lot of responses.
Sounds good. We have here a question in the front.
So just to add to that comment about the Monday event, as a student, I can say it was definitely useful to find out what other PhD students are working on. And also about the travel grants for students, that was very useful as well, because otherwise I would be able to come here.
Okay.
About this Monday workshop, it's different every year.
Yeah, that's what I said. It's just because it is whoever wants to organize, has the time, has the will. If you have an idea, come and ask.
Indeed, and it might be the format that people like, that, oh, we have people finding out what everybody's working on. That might be what they liked about it.
Then who in Stockholm wants to do an event about what people are doing after reviewing the code for other people? Yeah? So more non-board and no PC members, another PC member.
Yeah, sorry. So I know this isn't popular, but if there's so many papers that we do have to end up double tracking, one of the things that you can do is have poster session in some of the time. And I'm a big fan of poster sessions because of the choose your own adventure style of the conference, where you get individuals who are interested in particular work X get a lot of time to talk to that person and ask lots of questions. But
So more comments from people that are maybe more external to the PC, or people that come here for the first time, young people, people from other communities. We have one. Thank you very much.
I'm new to this community and presenting at Hot Pets on Friday, and the whole speed dating thing is kind of my hope for why I came here. So I was a little sad that it was at the end, because by the time I talk and anybody here knows anything about me, everybody will be leaving. I don't know if it's an appropriate question, but I'm just curious why Hot Pets is after.
All questions are appropriate.
Why Hot Pets is after and not before the main conference.
It's a very good question. Do you have an answer?
It's the way.
Yeah, we don't have a. Yeah,
Organic
we'll
growth.
consider it.
Yeah,
there is
it's
no
worth-
reason why we did this.
It's not as an afternoon, I think, Friday.
Yeah.
But why it was an afternoon on Friday and not on Monday is also why the ramp session is on Thursday. Very good question.
But
Thank
yeah,
you.
it's a good idea to think about, and whether that maybe the idea of like the Monday workshop flowing into Hot Pets, flowing into the pets would work better. I don't know.
So, sorry, yet another board member again. But, so one advantage of having it on Friday is that after 3 days of intense technical detailed things, you're suffering from brain's parmesan kind of thing, and your brain is a bit burnt out. And so somebody that's talking primarily about, here's this kind of cool idea that isn't entirely fleshed out, you still can handle that. Whereas, yes, you could handle it on Monday, but this is in a way helps the people who are on the last day of regular pets. Another way it helps is that sometimes people have to cut out on the last day, and this is a problem that all conferences face, that who's ever in the last session is underattended and stuff. And this is an incentive both to stick around to some extent if you are interested in hearing the hot, cool things, and also, if you cut out on that day, then you're still, it doesn't penalize the people who have their regular papers and pets, and somebody stuck around till then. So those are some of the multiple answers for why it's okay it's a good idea to be on Friday. That said, there are other ideas for why it might be good to have it on Monday, and we can take that offline.
So, going back to the kind of pre-pets event, like on Monday. So I actually have a question for the students who are here. as to whether or not they will be interested in having an event that is, maybe led or organized or particularly focused around PhD students. I mean, personally, one of the things that I love the most about PETS is that when I, started coming here as a PhD student, I formed a network of, fellow PhD students who are now, in various places, and this is like our generation, and we have a very good network. So, I mean, obviously that without a specific event, but if we can sort of encourage or support these kind of things, how would you feel?
In the distant past, the rump session was the first day and the second day. So that meant that if you knew what a rump session was, you could do it on the first day, and if you just realized it was really cool and you wanted to do that, there was still space on the second day. So there's no reason to lump it all into one place, except we have all these great papers now also, so there's always a balance.
So to catch up with Emiliano said, I think it will be fantastic actually. So I think as a PhD student, we have way too much time writing papers, reading, so on. But all this part of creating a conference, how the conference works, is a bit black to us. So if obviously it's a bit more work for the senior people, but if some senior people is willing to do that, will be a huge teaching experience. If one
Fresh
person,
postdocs can also organize.
fresh postdoc can also organize. But yeah, I think it would be if we have the support or the help from some senior that knows
He's a
how.
fresh postdoc. He can also organize. He's getting the message.
Are you suggesting that I do it? No, but what I want to say, like if we have the, like the guidance of somebody who knows how to do that, I think would be a perfect teaching experience also.
We can talk about it, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I would say, I think it's interesting that, traditionally, when PETS started, it was a workshop and it was a very young community, and that people were able to develop kind of into positions of leadership. And I think we want to preserve that. The external reviews are one way to do that, but, the grad students here, this is definitely like, it's yours as much as it's ours. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, and in some sense it's much more yours because you're the one that make it happen. We just are here running the show and answering questions. We didn't write anything. Emails.
Well, not for the past 2 years.
Sorry, I had a suggestion, and I really don't understand why hot pets needs to be held on a separate day. Why not the pets with the hot pets talks based on the subject? So we are listening to the same subject. The different works are in different stages of development. Some of them are not going to be published in the proceedings, but then we're learning about the same subject.
So it is very important that these two events are separated. In the past we had kind of a bit of a trouble because hot pets was kind of this mini part of pets. So sometimes hot pets was considered this mini part of pets, and as such other conferences were saying, oh, this is actually a publication or not. So we have a super important separation and different chairs and different everything to make it clear that this is a work in progress thing that has nothing to do with pets, and I think mixing it would be a mistake for this reason.
Yeah, the issue that, to be more clear, is like conferences would literally say like, oh, you published that already in PETS, what are you doing submitting it? Are you being like an unethical person? And so drawing that line is very important to say that these are different things so that you don't run into that position later when you try and actually publish your hot pets work when it's less hot.
So we had a less of a tough line, and now we have a very tough one, just to avoid that the people that submit to hot pets have problems elsewhere. We still have 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Do we want to? Do you want to bring up some of the questions again, just to see if there's anything we haven't addressed?
So I guess this is.
Yeah, let's go. But let's.
So I guess this is like a comment / suggestion for the workshop thing and the PhD students. So as a master's student, I don't want to be left out. And also there are great undergrads. Like there was a great presentation last year, and apparently there's some this year. And I think it's important to not develop more and more strands of hierarchy within the conference. So it's important to consider, like, I guess, students as a whole and the development of students, and that they learn more things, but let's not make more hierarchies. That would be something that I would look forward to.
That's a good point. Yeah, students, you can also organize. Like, if you want to organize, with Pedro, we can make it happen right here, right now.
No hierarchies when
And
it comes to.
I do want to make sure that like everybody realizes that the external reviewer opportunity is here, and also that there is the, you know, this stipend opportunity for students and non-students. I mean, obviously those that are here know this, but maybe some of the people watching on the stream or whatever, that there are opportunities to get you here and get involved and so on.
Okay, I have two comments that I think haven't really come up yet. So one is about interdisciplinarity, because I see now there's a question of we have broadened a lot, and I think that raises a number of questions about how to do things methodologically more rigorous. One of the things I've seen, not just as pets, is that there are lots of different web transparency or tracking measurement studies that only rely on the tracking data that they compile through technical means, but then they don't look at the companies or the actual practices as written up through other sources. In other fields, there's something called triangulation, where basically you collect data from one source and then you collect from another source and another source to make sure that there's some rigor with respect to the data that you collected in one source with the other. So you compare them to see if you can come to a maybe more rigorous claim of truth or some sort of scientific contribution. And what I've seen now with measurement papers is that we write critiques and then we get a new version and the results are different, right? So they've counted again, they've used maybe another technique, they've cleaned up their data set, and we get different results, which I'm really worried about, especially if these papers hit the news. And it turns out that if you would just have set up the measurement somewhat differently, you would get totally different numbers. And I think one way to deal with these kind of issues is to increase methodological rigor and be serious about interdisciplinarity and consider doing things like studying the trackers industry a bit more in depth and doing interviews, or working with people who can do these things if you feel that as a computer scientist you don't have these skills.
We would be super happy if you can submit us a list of names, and we'll add them to the PC as well.
I can't hear you, sorry.
We would be very happy if you can provide a list of names of people that can help us in this aspect, because many times we don't have them, as well as other interdisciplinary fields. We're trying to bring lawyers, we have more social scientists, but some of these people, we just don't know them.
Yeah, and I mean, it is the case that when we invite people like that into the editorial board, we're not expecting them necessarily to like bid on every round and, you know, oh, there weren't any papers like that, so here's an NPC paper. Like that's not what we're gonna do, right? Like we have a large editorial board, but it's to try and help us handle this. But we can always get more people like that.
Right, and thank you. And the second comment I had was with respect to engineering. I know that Tarek and I have had lots of conversations about this already. I think a lot of the work we do is also, I mean, Carmela has this really beautiful picture of the sketch of an owl and then actually implementing, if you're actually drawing an owl, which is equivalent to implementing some of the protocols that we write about in our papers. And those are two very different things, and they're very important contributions on their own, and they feed each other. And we've always kind of wished on some level for the ability to demonstrate your work and to discuss the engineering aspects and to see how those things feed back to the protocol design. I know that our universities do not reward us for the engineering work. Most of the work that is engineered is gradware. As students graduate, they kind of disappear and the work is gone. But not only is the code base gone, but the experience of building pets is also gone. So I wonder if there's a place for that kind of work to be shared and to be also supported. Thank you.
Yeah. There was, I think in Indiana Pets, there was the Pet Tools Workshop, which tried to focus on that, and I mean, I thought that that was a nice thing. So again, people have kind of done these things in one-off, but if, you know, that's something where if people want to do more of that, it's good. But yeah.
And we also welcome that stuff if it's really high quality into the main pets as well.
Right, yeah. And yeah, I think, you know, yeah, like I think that there are lessons to be learned there in our community, and if it's, you know, figuring out how to present a good engineering contribution to pets is something that we should think about.
And this is where we do value the release of code highly and things like that.
Yeah.
I don't really know how to answer that.
Yeah, but
sure. I just want to give a quick props to the expansion of reviewers. It was very evident. I presented the illustration paper yesterday, and when my advisor was like, let's submit it to pets, I was like, are you insane? Like, that is totally the wrong venue for this paper. I was expecting to get like shredded by some cryptographers and reviews, but so it was very evident from the reviews that there was like a lot of social scientists reading that paper who like understood qualitative research, and it was super nice, really high quality reviews, really great job. So, excuse me, thank you for that.
So one of the things, this is in answer to what Seda was saying, one of the things in thinking about broadening and interdisciplinarity, I think about this a lot when I write about which audience am I trying to impact. And so there's going to be a limit here on what we can do within pets, because often the social scientists really want to impact the social scientists or the policy folks rather than our community, or the lawyers want to do the same thing. And so that one has to think, well, if we want to broaden, maybe the broadening comes from having invited speakers from outside, because getting the paper contributions may not be possible.
Yeah. One thing that some conferences have done, like the AI field did this, is they started to fragment a little bit, where they would have something called a nectar track, which is like if you would if like there was a track where you actually are presenting a paper that you published somewhere else, and you submit it to be presented here in that track. Maybe that's a model we could look at, or something like, so that, you know, and I think WISE, like the Economics of Information Security, also has sort of a similar thing. So maybe that's.
WISE does something. I'll try to do it with that, Mike. WISE does something completely different.
Right.
Because it's economists and it does. Because it's economists and computer scientists, what it does is it doesn't have publications, so that the publications occur for the economists and the economics fora and the computer scientists and the computer science fora, and it deliberately eschews publications.
Yeah.
So it'll have slides up from the meeting.
Yeah. In the past, they'd often have a sort of a special issue volume or something, but I haven't been to WISE.
They're still doing that, but that will be some of the papers. It won't be.
It won't be all of them.
Yeah, but the nectar idea sounds like a great idea, because I think the cross-fertilization is really useful and really important.
So on the topic of the pet tool style, you know, thinking more about implementations. I don't know whether you currently look for technical reviewers or not, like engineering-like reviewers, because obviously this year it seems you've worked on proof reviewers, for instance, and specifically in a case of a paper needing that. I imagine there'd be various people who'd be interested in, say, doing reviews of code that does get submitted, just to provide it sort of an additional aspect and a bit of a feedback loop on that side, who may not necessarily have the background or that to do the full review of the paper, but could sort of help with the feedback loop on that side, particularly if you're interested in developing that aspect of pets more. Yeah.
It's a good suggestion. It's another way of doing this code review we're thinking about. I think this is going to eventually happen, but it's going to take time, as I said, because you need an infrastructure and responsible people. And so far, we have not really found a way to even start it up, but that's a good one.
But people who are interested in doing this sort of thing should reach out.
Yeah.
It's a, I think that the Debian statement of it'll happen when it happens faster if you help.
Yeah, and especially so this Monday opportunity. I mean, it's a good thing because I mean, like this is the possibility of having a Monday event. I mean, if you really cares about having tools at PET, and I think that, I mean, it's an important thing. Like, I mean, the academic world in general has not given enough emphasis. I mean, we have a gazillion procedures to judge papers, workflows to deal with what a paper will happen in a paper, where to publish it, and with code. I mean, code is important, and there's nothing. Everything is very much in the academic world, like gradware everywhere, and yeah, it's not clear. Like, there are all these questions about code, and we don't know what to answer because, I mean, we are thinking in terms of what to do for the next PET, like concrete things, and it's completely unclear what to do for the...
I actually went and asked the software engineering people that have this artifact program committee, but they have a full infrastructure and people that do that, and a committee of like 10 people that do that. And yeah, I think we need to think hard about who also can be in charge of leading that, because we need somebody that goes strongly and takes care of that, because you and me have to take care of all the stuff.
Yeah, so if anyone wants to, organize some Monday thing with focus on where we can go in the direction of handling code.
There can be multiple Monday things in parallel as well.
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay. Were you busy with
More questions? We have another 10 minutes. More suggestions?
Yeah, I guess I have one question for the group. Yeah, which is, it's related to this broadening thing. Now, I think I'm pretty broad in this community, but like how, I think it's, we were single track this year, sort of kind of incidentally, but it's, we haven't had the whole thing yet, but people can see the sessions that we have. I think there's a lot of value to having, all of these different people that view privacy from different perspectives in the same conference, and kind of seeing that and learning how people are thinking about it differently from the different sessions. I'm curious how the audience is feeling about that in some respects. Is it like, well, I have my sessions that I care about, and this other stuff that it's great, I can hallway track, but which is good too. But I'm just like, what is kind of how are people feeling about the event and the broadness and the applicability of the various sessions to their intellectual growth and whatnot?
Made a very difficult question.
I know.
Wow.
Are you awake? Are you hungry? Should we go?
That's an easier question, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we'll all still be here, and we have email and whatnot, but I mean, I do, yeah.
It's silent with some of the students.
How many students, I would like to do kind of a quick, like, how many students are here, just in general? Okay, we do a good, postdocs? Postdocs, people from industry, professoring types,
people that don't fall in any of these categories.
Okay. So we got our government and NGOs fits over here. Okay, so we got a nice group. That's one thing I wanted to get a sense of who's in the room. Yeah.
So speaking of no hierarchies, you were talking about students or students or students, but back in the day, PETS was a lot more, there are people actually building tools, how do we analyze them, how do we help them build more tools? And it's really solidified, as all academic conferences do, into, I mean, you say, yes, you're very broad, meaning you think that papers are products and you work on this academic thing and this academic thing. Whereas in the broader privacy world, there are a lot of different people who do a lot of different things. And one of the challenges that we really face as a community is how do we get that breadth of people here? And academics are thinking, you're right, there are different academic disciplines that are missing, but the people who build things are thinking, there are people who actually build things that are missing, and how do we get them? And the stipends are one answer. But how do we grow as a community to get the people who do things to be part of us? Because we need them. If we are just academically analyzing things as papers, we're never going to matter.
So Roger gave me the perfect intro, which is, I think that part of what we're also missing, and that's the problem with publication, is the applied problems, whether they come from industry or they come from policy or they come from law. You're not going to get those people in. I mean, occasionally there was I'm told only because I no longer go to crypto, Adam Govjak gave a fabulous talk at Crypto one year as a keynote on the real problems that Google has in doing crypto. Having people in the law talk about, well, here's what privacy means here, here's what privacy means there, what does privacy really mean? Those kinds of things are really useful for this community. We've had Susan McDonald do, do cross-fertilization. I don't, Rachel, we've broadened a lot. You're using one definition of broadening, and I think there's a much bigger one, but hard to get those people in, and yet useful for informing the research.
We would also love suggestions for keynotes, by the way. If you have an idea of anything like that, super happy.
In theory, this can be what HotPets is for.
Yeah, I think responding to this broadening to other people who are not necessarily academics, and I think this is something that is important that we should do. I think this is not just something for the best chairs. I think this is something for everybody in the room. So that means that if you know people who are building tools or who are doing things or that are relevant to the kind of work that is presented in this conference or relevant to the interests of the people here, there's people that could be brought into the community. I mean, talk to them about pets, tell them there is funding for stipends, and kind of advocate that they try to pull them in. So, but this is something that we have to do, all of us as a community. We cannot expect that some procedure from a couple of people are going to solve the problem.
Sorry.
Following on that, basically, one of the nicest things about some of the tools that is coming out of people in this room is that they get used by people to protect their privacy. And there are lots of activist communities that are now using tools that have been inspired by the work that has been done by people in this room. There are also a lot of trainers out there. There are a lot of people who are trying to make the tools kind of part of people's everyday. So one of the things I think that we could do is bring those people in to talk about their experiences of pets and what it means for them, their struggles, where things don't fit. And I think, when we think about communities, we think about maybe just developers or policymakers and what have you, other experts. But I think we should also see the users that we're developing these tools for and the communities that are using them as part of our audience and even part of our community.
So, I mean, Usenix, for example, has an invited talks track, and maybe that's something we could look into, but I mean,
Just real quick, in the past we've had like a couple of panels where we've had 4 or 5 people on, and that could invite some more people in.
I mean, especially if we end up moving to a situation where we're going to be, where the papers increase again and we're going to be multi-tracking anyway, then maybe we can start to think through, though that's going to fragment us even more, perhaps.
One thing that I miss, I think, and I thought, am I here? Yeah. One thing I miss, and I really want to talk to everybody. Sorry.
No, please switch.
I'm close to. Yeah, I wonder if there's scope to have some discussion that kind of started to arise yesterday about things like deniability and advertising trackers and things like this. Do you think there's scope to have some sort of debate or forum on one of the evenings where the community as a whole maybe comes to some consensus about how we feel about these things, or is that too political and not what you want to think about?
No, that's, I think, you know, a lot of, sometimes some parts of Hot Pets have tried to do that more in terms of allowing for a lot more discussion around things that come up, but I think that's another thing we could play around with the program in terms of having more discussion, not just about this process, but discussion about the actual topics that's open to everybody. Some time for that.
Like the evening event, we could try to do something like that. Yeah, thanks.
I think we absolutely should. I think there is, I think tracking definitely is one of the topics in which we can get a lot of interesting voices. And the idea of panels next year, I think that's great. I'm going to more and more conferences that do panels, and I think it's a great alternative to Keynote. It's just you get sort of a breadth of opinions, you see who you want to talk to next, that sort of thing. It's really quite nice. And I think academic conferences have shied away from that format traditionally. You know, for a sort of a closer community like this one, I think it would make quite a lot of sense to do that. And we could do a mix of, like, has been suggested, you know, I don't know, people from law, people from the industry, that sort of thing, and you have a natural combination of things that you want to accomplish there.
In the minute we have, can we make a show of hands for people that like panels? And people that prefer keynotes?
It doesn't necessarily have to be either or, but...
Yeah, so the first question is people that prefer panels? And the second was keynotes? Thank you, just to get a... Yeah, just...
So, yes, no?
Okay, so Ian want to know who's here for the first time? Wow! Andre, do you have a question?
So not to state the common truth, but panels are incredibly hard to organize and fail rather often, right? Another thing to note is that compared to a few of the last year's ones, you know, we start late, we have 1.5 hours for lunch, we have 1.5 hours for the town hall, right? I think we actually have a lot of space, right? It could be a lot tighter if you wanted to. Well, not 16 hours of talks, but you know what I mean. Starting at 10, you know, we're not exactly pushed for time here, right? So I think we could.
Spain is the problem. Yeah, Spain is not the problem. What?
No. The reason Spain is the reason we're starting at 10 and ending later, because so that we'll be ending
Spain
at
is the
Spanish
solution
this time. We're not actually. Yeah, we don't actually have a shorter day. We just have a different day.
Yeah.
But.
Right. So just to get back to the comment, is I think we could put 1 or 2 more things in without detrimentally affecting the conference and going multi-track and whatever we don't want to do.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see if we have 50 papers again next year. So.
But the comment has been taken. Okay. If there is not any other pressure question, then I think we
it's
can go for
lunchtime.
lunch.